So just there's been an ask from Shane. He's working on an open source data architecture pattern layer. So Shane, if you wouldn't mind, we'll your email in the chat so that people can get it. So I just want to show people quickly what he's doing. Basically instructions to set up these architectural patterns. And of course, there's lots of interesting things for the governance people, like the governance policy on the different layers, examples on the bronze and the gold and silver and the different areas, and then a dictionary of some of the terminology and some of the lookups. So I think Shane's looking for some people to test, some people to help, and I'm not sure if there's anything else. I know that we'll get Shane to present it at some stage. I think after the meeting on Monday, there were lots of people, especially Johan, asking questions. Well, where do we do the governance? How do we govern this? And how do we get all of this right? So I believe, Shane, it would deal with a lot of those questions. Is that a correct assumption?
It's an attempt to, yeah. So it's just born out of the frustration of not having a template available that I could find that helped me do that governance across the layers. So I started one and got some help from some friends to iterate it, but now it needs to be battle tested. So it needs people who haven't seen it before to look at it, tell me what doesn't make sense, help me iterate it so that it becomes a fully formed, reusable pattern template. So that's the goal.
Great. Thank you very much, Shane. And we'll hopefully have you on one of the webinars to take people through it and understand. Great. So that's just a shout out for Shane. If we look at the presentation for today, sure, I don't know how many of you have seen on LinkedIn and on this modern data report 2026 called the Data Activation Gap. That's just been released. I got an assessment from TWBI, or TWI is the right one. That's a spelling mistake. And I went through the assessment as well. So it's so much of the people are coming out and saying, well, your executives, they all want to make use of the AI and GenAI and whatever it is for innovation. And they do expect that the data is ready and everything's ready for this escapade. And I wonder how many of you are secretly thinking, oh my goodness, we're nowhere near ready. And then I wonder how many of you are thinking, well, I don't even know what that readiness means. So that's why we put this together. And I've got the two Pauls with me, Paul Kobler and Paul Bolton, that are helping me put together an integrated architecture course that helps people understand the different layers of architecture and how they contribute to the AI readiness. So sure, the data architect will be handling some of the data platform things like Shane's been talking about, plus the data models. The business architect would be looking at the business value and things like that. And so how do we get everybody working together to help us become AI ready? And just I mean, I saw this activation gap and I was quite shocked at how low some of the areas are in the percentages and where the waste is coming in. And quickly, just to show you the TWI, that this is an assessment that I did yesterday, and I just did it to get an understanding of the questions. So these are some of the questions that they ask. So are we confident in the integrity of our data structures and data sources? Is it fragmented? And then we go into all sorts of other ones like, are we confident in our unstructured data? And I'm sure you know where some of this is going, because GenAI and LLMs and RAGs are getting just about every form of data that's possible. we need to be asking the questions, are we ready to load the stuff up into a RAG or a chatbot that's going to give customer advice? They're going to, in some cases, accept the claim, and insurance cases, some cases they will suggest that that claim should be rejected and then go into a human in the loop to be able to say, oh, right, this data science algorithm detected that this is a potential fraud and somebody has to explain it. Now the question is, well, how are the business people going to understand the output of that AI model and communicate with the user and just to make sense? And we've had a few of those discussions. So it was quite exciting to go through all of these questions with TDW. Shucks, I keep TDWI. So this is, are we ready for the agentic AI? Do we have any policies and procedures? What is the shared semantic layer? So these are really nice questions that you could be asking yourself. And what I would suggest is that you ask yourself the question before the CEO asks you the question of, let's use this and when can we have it ready? I think that the answer that you give him may be a little bit depressing. And of course, you'd need to find a way of going slowly, doing the crawl, walk, run, and bringing some of that in. But you have to be careful of those expectations. So the CEO is going to have lots of expectations that we can just get going and start using all of this fancy technology. Any comments from anybody? But I've just seen everybody talking about, are we ready? Can you later deal with it? Any comments from anybody that would like to share? Mr. Grobler, any comments from your side?
Not really anything to contribute there, just to say that I can concur that is the questions, and I don't think there's good answers yet.
Right.
And I don't think there's an easy way to express that the value that you need to bring into to your AI plans. But there's still a nervousness, and I must say there's been over the last few months with our customers, probably last year or so, last 6 months, definitely more of a caution as opposed to pure ecstatic excitement. Yes. So I think that's healthy.
Right. And it's good to see Kira put his name, his comment there. He falls in the bucket of not ready and not knowing what is ready. So I think that's a very helpful place to start. And I like that, and I'm actually going to take you through some of the assessment. I've got an Excel spreadsheet here. I was trying to put it into the chat, but for some reason I'm getting blocked. Bongani.
Hi, Howard.
Hi.
Maybe just to add on that, I think for I'll just give an example at my workplace, because we had to put some AI use cases, and I've realized that as we are putting AI use cases, some of the things we expect Gen AI to sort of like be cleaning our data, some of the things we just need to see at how do we fix the data before we can get into to using the Gen AI. So I think it also helps us to identify some of the things that we thought that technology can just do it. There are still things that needs to be done. Like if you're looking at data quality, which is like a biggest thing. Obviously, if the data quality is not in place, if it's not correct, and whatever that we feed Gen AI, the output that we'll get will depend on whatever that we've put in.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And then we know exactly why that thing is hallucinating, because it's got bad data and we provided that. Yeah, so this is an important thing. And we've also got Dale on the line, and Dale has done some amazing work in terms of defining quality for GenAI, hallucination, toxicity, and using those dimensions, that dimensional approach, and he refers to it ensemble as well, and the metrics to be able to vet how good this model is performing, how good this LLM is performing, and then if it's not doing too well, I think we have to get it out of there before it causes too much damage. In vivo?
Yes,
Are you up?
thank you.
Oh,
It's not a comment, it's a question. So I saw a mention of the semantic layer. So I've had multiple people talk about the semantic layer, but I don't know if there's any single definition, or at least I don't really understand really what it means from a practical point of view. So I don't know if you have any insights into that.
Okay,
Thanks.
we do have a slide on that, so we will talk through it, but you are right. And remember the semantic layer, I think it starts off with Cognos, where they put a business meaning layer on top of the cubes, and the business people could query the data using business terminology. I don't know if you remember that in Diva.
Yeah, I mean, we do have, actually, one of the reasons I'm asking is because they're different IBM products with different
Right.
interpretation of that.
Okay, Shane, you say you have a strong opinion. I'm assuming that's a very strong opinion, not just.
Yeah, so I don't know whether you want my strong opinion now or after you get to the slide where you talk about semantic layers, and then I can temper it with what you're saying or not.
Okay, we can do that. Yeah, let's go on. All right, so let's start off here. What you will find is I've got I'm happy to share the deck, and I've got one slide that's really just the text, and I've got another set of slides that is more Nano Banana Pro images of the slide, which make it more interesting to maybe present to a executive or things like that. So the big issue that we talk about is that most organizations overestimate AI readiness. And the issue isn't the algorithm so much as it is the foundations. And I think certainly when you start to use and depend on AI extensively, you start to see the power, but then you get caught up with the data that's going in and the architecture, the platform. Can the platform support streaming? Can it grow to the size that it needs to go? Can it consume all the energy, and can we financially afford it? So there's a whole lot of other questions that come to play. So my definition of AI ready is that we have the right business alignment there. We have the appropriate architecture. And one of the gaps that the modern data stack pointed out was this discovery gap, the ability for people and AI to find the data that's appropriate to the question, appropriate to its job, and is it trustworthy? We need governance. And then, of course, we need corporate memory. So what do we know about claims? What do we know about policies or policy holders, so that the AI system or the LLM can make use of that corporate memory and not make use of other memory where we're not sure where it gets it. And there was a really nice presentation that I found where people are suggesting that data management is this area of the wheels between the models. So we've got the AI models coming in all sorts of different shapes and forms, but we need to get this axle sorted out that the models can roll on. And I like that way of seeing our role, our data management role within this whole AI scenario. Now, this was one of the findings of the modern data stack, to be able to say that the discovery of the right data is it's the one that's taking the most brain. It's the one that's it's taking people longest to find the data. And the idea is to find certified data and contextual data fast before we get into modeling. And if we remember the CRISP VM one, it's about understand the business requirement, then go and identify the sources, bring them in, and do the evaluation. Now, Nisha's asked the question, can you perhaps cover this question in the scenario where metadata is non-existent? How do we use AI to help us fast track and close this gap? And that is very important. There's something I saw that another one coming out just the other day where people are saying the data catalog is dead. And the metadata intelligence platform is the new data catalog. Now, what the reason for some of that is saying that we have to actively go and collect the data from all the different data sources, make sense out of it, because we can't do this manually. So we can't depend on business data stewards cataloging their data and adding all the metadata. It's just going to take too long. And so I think we have to seriously look at using AI, not just for metadata, but for data quality. Those ongoing assessments, when we talk about the observability, where that's been helped. And I think and I think Dale talks to that as well, where you're using LLM as a judge. So when an LLM gives advice, one of the things you want to do is before you give it to the person, you give it to another LLM, and that LLM has one response. Is this answer toxic? Is this answer hallucinating? And so that's certainly what it's all about. Okay, so you can't not use AI to help you with collecting the metadata, helping you to understand the quality, because things are happening in real time. Nisha, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thanks, Howard. Thank you.
Okay. So just think about it. If someone is hacking your bot or whatever it is, and your bot starts to become toxic, you can't wait for tomorrow morning sort of on for it to say, oh, shucks, we've got a problem. Let's take it down. The damage is being caused, and you can't hang around. So this is all real-time stuff, which is different to the age of like data engineering, where we move the data and then we check the quality, and you can do it manually. So you've got to improve that dramatically. Okay. All right, great. So this is our funnel, which we call the readiness funnel. We go from data all over the place. We need to look at the shared semantics and the glossaries of the business. So what is the knowledge structure? What is the structure and the meaning of the words that we use within our organization? And I don't know if you remember, for example, in document and content, that's where they had the introduction of controlled vocabularies and multifaceted taxonomies and ontologies. That was where you create the structure of knowledge, and knowledge with structure of information. And so that's an area that we need to look at. And then we go into quality, cleaning, the architecture, governance across all areas. So we're looking at governance on data, we're looking at governance on records, we're looking at governance on corporate knowledge, policies, document, things like that. We're needing to bring all of this stuff together. We look at ethics, ethical handling of people and things like that. How do we ensure that we're operating and not getting lost, we're not losing one or the other? Okay, so back to this thing of AI is the wheel, and architecture and governance with axles. And so what I'm finding a lot is and I got a big surprise when Mario started presenting some of the numbers from PMI in terms of the number of failures, both in GenAI and in AI, that were high up in 70 to 80%. That's where those are the numbers and some of the failures. Okay, that is a bit scary. in terms of the number of failures that we have. And I start to realize this where the AI team feels that they can make such a difference, they rush into making that difference, but then they can't sustain that difference. They can't sustain that level of improvement or development that they're working on. So the great models without those axles will be wobbling, and strong axles without governance will drift and will move into areas that they shouldn't be moving into. So there you see the different, when we talk about wheels, we've got AI models, we've got co-pilots, we've got agents, we've got applications, we've got LLMs, SLMs. Those are all the different types of things that we can make use of to help the business make decisions. So what does AI really actually mean? And for me, it's about, are we starting with business goals? I've been involved in a few AI innovation hubs where they say, let's start doing something, let's start creating something. And basically they get some really clever data scientists and they say, please look at the data and see what you can find. And what I'm really worried about a lot of the times is that there's no business goal. And sometimes when we brought the business in to assess the findings, a lot of them just saying, well, that's interesting, but how does it help me from a business point of view? I don't think this problem is just a challenge that the AI people feel. I think there's problems on BI. I think there's problems of data governance. Like, how do we know the value that we are delivering? So we don't start with the business goals. We're going to have a problem. So the question would be, at this point in time within your business, do you have a way of any data initiative that is started? Does it depend on a business goal? Can you find a KPI that you're here to do? So let's hope we're not just, let's do AI metadata or automated semantic models and then just hope that it provides business value. That's a dangerous ground to walk on. Then do we have purposeful design, looking at our semantics, looking at the data, looking at the platforms? Do we bring this all together? Are we bringing it all together? And so the real formula for that is that we are driven by business goals and strategy. We have the appropriate architecture and we have the continuous governance. Some of that continuous governance should come in the form of automation, things like policy as code, and can we implement it in a runtime environment? Okay. So we need to define the business capabilities, the decisions that those capabilities need to make to be able to deliver value, the meaning that we are talking about. And I always like this one is, do we understand the meaning of our KPIs? How many KPIs do we have out there that we don't really understand the terminology that it's measuring? We don't understand how it's compiled. We don't have a fixed definition of how it's aggregated. But we've got the KPIs all over it. Okay. Customer lifetime value talks to things like customers, but if we don't have a good definition of what a customer is, and then how do we measure the lifetime value that that customer brings to us, we've got challenges, we've got problems. So it doesn't matter how good the analysis is at the downstream. If it starts off with these shaky foundations, then you're not going to get decent results out of the AI platform. Okay, so I want to start just a little higher up at the business architecture in terms of understanding, do we have all of our business goals defined? Do we have a business strategy? Do we have a value proposition, a value stream, a capability model that we can connect to? So whatever work you get asked to do, can we connect it to something? So that would be good in terms of being able to say, okay, when I bring this AI use case in, and I think that is a great observation. that we spoke about earlier on. We've got these use cases, but we're not sure how to link it to the value streams or the KPIs to ensure strategic alignment. And then the hardest thing is to say, well, are we actually getting the benefit? Is the business deriving benefit out of faster automated decision making on claims? Are the revenue figures growing in the way it should be done? Now, if we don't have these capability maps, we tend to find solutions and we drift on our scope. So we don't actually know what is the business capability or the business process that we're dealing in, and we can go out all over the place. Because we don't clearly understand what the business does. I really like having chats with Marco Wilben, and I see them close talking about the same thing. It's about having like common business meaning and business understanding before we start trying to implement technology into together. And the value stream should be the things that point out where are we losing money. So is it when we get driven by a business person to say we've got to do this, can he point out to us where the friction is, where he's losing money, where we are wasting time? And this is what the AI needs to focus on, specifically removing the waste and the latency. So can we reduce the amount of time when we submit a claim? Can we give an auto approval or something to say, oh, this is too risky, let's get someone in and we go for a little bit of a longer journey. So that's certainly what the business needs to provide us. And these are the checkpoints that data governance should be bringing in when these use cases are being provided, is to, which capability are we improving? What step has got the constraints in, and what KPI moves when we succeed? Okay. So those are the checks that we need to bring in. And I wanted to just ask Paul. Paul does a lot of business modeling and business architecture. Is there anything that you'd like to add in just setting the guardrails and setting the tone for the AI and what we need to deliver when we start linking to business architecture?
Yeah, thanks, Howard. I was reading I'm sure you did as well. It's a diversity report, I think, that came out in the beginning of the year. And what I found interesting was it was about data management, and they dealt with sort of where AI ranked in terms of importance and so on. And what was interesting is in the sort of three main verticals in the world, the US and Europe and Asia, there's different approaches that they take to what what the value really is. And Europe is by far the most conservative. They take a risk-based approach, and we saw this with one of our hospital clients, where very early in last year, they were tasked to go through all the systems, all the machines that they use, everything, and see where AI is used or could be used, and then classify that in terms of a risk register. Right? And the US is a little bit more lenient. They're more going after marketing and change, and innovation. But in the East, innovation just jumps up. But all of them had data quality under the top three. And in the case of Europe, it was quite far above AI. And I think that's an important thing to link to these discussions, because the value, some would assign value to, or it will be a risk-based assessment of what should be seen as value or going to market or whatever. Okay. But yeah, you're asking about these, and you mentioned Archie, and I find it very helpful to create these value streams in Archie, and then link each value stream to the capability maps, the two capabilities, specifically business capabilities. If I can share, I can maybe just share an example. I'm not sure if.
You may 1 moment.
I don't think I have the rights
No?
because I'm a.
Get the next now. I just got to find you first.
And this sort of approach does come from earlier work that you've done, Howard, that I sort of picked up from you, and sort of just a value-based approach. And the way that we've been doing it in Archie is quite helpful. Just to pinpoint, maybe I should zoom out. Just to pinpoint, where is it that you want the AI use case to focus? And if you don't have that value stream, which is the beginning of that's your business architecture, right? If you don't have that, you're just gonna flop around and tread water, because your ideas about, your definitions about what value really is going to be floppy, right?
Right. So that we made a presenter.
All right, let me see. Okay, sure.
And I know that Shane presented on the products, the product scorecard or the product canvas that Shane uses. And Shane, I'm wondering, do you at all link it to anything in the business architecture, or it's really just what is the value of that to you as a stakeholder?
So, in theory, the actions and outcomes on every information product canvas should go back to the business strategy.
Right. Okay.
So otherwise, we're doing actions and outcomes that don't align with the strategy of the organization. However, the number of times I see work being done for actions and outcomes that can't be linked to the business strategy is often. So
100%. Sorry, Paul. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, the picture that you're looking at is basically a value chain of a diamond sorting facility. And I was really fascinated. We visited this particular site, and as part of the business architecture, we could draw up this basic value chain.
Right.
Which starts with they need to plan. Planning means they need to plan for diamonds to come into the facility, right? So that it can be received in a secure manner and things like that. Then it goes through basic cleansing. So this is core capabilities. You have different kinds of cleaning depending on the diamond type. And you have to, you get a bunch of things here coming from the mine. So you have to sift them and clean them depending on what they are. And at the end of the day, you want to get to value them, right? So that they can be sold back. So there's basic cleaning, and then there's sorting and valuation, and then there's negotiation about the price, and then sales. So that's the basic, high level chain. But then when you have that, you can go and go to the capabilities, right? So for planning, you need, for example, these three things. For cleaning, you need deep salt cleaning versus ultrasonic cleaning versus whatever. And without going into too much detail, I think what you are saying here on your slide is this is a nice way to, you look at, you have business conversations with people like this. Right now it looks a bit detailed, but once you present this and you clean it up a bit, you can have very sensible business discussions with the experts in the business. And this is where you then try to link your value to, right? Which of these capabilities are AI capable or should be AI capable, or where can we use AI to improve or help with these particular capabilities?
And I suppose what you need is the data to say the diamond cleansing is taking me 6 months and I need to bring it down. If I could bring it down by 20 days, this is the benefit that I'm going to get, so that you can have the value to them.
Right. And once you have an idea of what your capabilities are, obviously, if you double click on these, you'll go into more things like processes and so on. But you can already get a high level link. If we talk about cleaning, we talk about diamond, data about the diamonds. If we talk about the sealing and so on, we are talking about specifically the diamond consignment and the mines, where it comes from, and stock levels, things like that. So anyway, I just thought this would give some context to this slide. Yeah,
that's good. That's really what I wanted to show, because my next thing I wanted to share with you is This is just a quick readiness assessment, and it was nice that Shane also knew the term of business outcomes and KPIs. So one of the first questions we ask is, well, do you have clear business outcomes and KPIs? So what state are you in? And I've just set up some mock things to be, I haven't started with it. I'm reactive. When I need it, I'll work out what the business outcome is. Or I'm operationalized, it's available, I can find it. Or I'm innovating, meaning that I'm getting better at this at all times. And then I've got a target to be, I'd like to have this operationalized. And then, of course, we've got an executive to say, well, what is his expectation of where we're at? It then helps me to build something like this, where I can then have an understanding of, well, where am I? And what should I be starting on? And then to do a risk analysis of, okay, that's where I am. These are the areas I should look at. Where are my quick wins and things like that. So that's what we're wanting to do with the business architecture. So there were a couple of, I think there were a couple of questions on business architecture. It's just the one. Okay. There was a question there. So press the layers and how to attribute. Okay, using data architecture layer pattern. Okay, we better link specific AI capabilities to measurable outcomes. So what I would suggest we do, Stian, is that you sort of follow the approach of core, where we look at the business challenges first, and then the business would say, I've got waste in this area, and if I can reduce it by this, then my revenue will increase by X, or my bonus will be Y, and things like that, rather than saying, well, I've got this nice AI thing that I want to do, and how do I prove value? Because we can argue that value comes from all sorts of what's possible and what's not. Still, you see what I'm suggesting is we rather align with challenges that the business are facing, and then look at what AI can we apply to the challenges, not start off with AI initiatives and then see if we can justify them. Okay. Great. All right. So that's what the business architecture does. Now we get into the semantic layer, when we talk about establishing a shared language, and that's by creating glossaries, creating concept models, and please be aware of this. I'm not saying just a conceptual data model. There are many different ways of creating concept models, and almost look like a graph where you have concepts relating to each other. And then one can have ontologies and taxonomies that define the structure of the words that people mean. And I'm also finding that if I pay a lot of attention to my definitions, and I have the appropriate elements to my definition, I can derive a lot of this information using that subject, predicate, object approach. And that helps with the development of an ontology. And an ontology is a machine readable. If you put OWL or RDF and things like that, now the machine can read that business glossary. And how many of you have done manual business glossaries in Word? I find that to be something like a death march, where you're doing all of these fancy definitions, but is anybody going to use it, and is any system or software going to benefit from it? That's the heart. Now, what has been coming out lately is reducing AI hallucinations and making use of ontologies to help us reduce that AI hallucination. Now, these ontologies can be provided upfront in terms of, is the person asking the prompt or writing the prompt using the right terminology? If they use the right terminology, then they're going to get a better answer, given that this model has been geared around that language. When the model responds and we get a response, we can also make use of an ontology to say, well, are you using terminology that we have agreed on, or have you introduced some terminology that's not there? And the common one that I find is something like a data lifecycle. I don't know how many of you have ever tried to get a common definition of a data lifecycle. 9 times out of 10 on most of the LLMs that I go to, their data lifecycle cycle starts at create. Okay. And then it ends at enable or enhance, which is the AI thing. But it doesn't include the plan, it doesn't include the design, and it doesn't include the dispose, and there are elements missing. So this becomes one of our challenges that we're working. Okay. So this is where we can make use of this semantic model to validate what we are saying and validate what people are saying. And I think that's another lesson that I've learned is we always think it's in the realm of an AI model that hallucinates, but we don't always recognize when people hallucinate. When people share information, believing that they know what it's all about, and they don't actually know, and they're not sure of that comment. So hallucination is a sickness that we all structure, we all battle with. But it's about getting these structured facts. And Marco Werben's really strong on this. He actually feels that, we jump to the data models too quickly, and we're not getting the business model defined, the business language first. We're missing that step. And I think there are problems there. And it's really helpful for everyone to know this idea of breaking definitions down into simple sentences. And I like to have basically 3 to 4 words in a sentence because we can all agree on what that sentence means. If I have a paragraph of 10 lines, I can tell you that you won't get an agreement on those 10 lines. People will have different opinion on that. So how do we break it down into, how do we classify this term? And classification is using an ISA. So a credit card is a bank account, the type of bank account, or a claim is, or a fire event, whatever it is. First of all, start off with a classification. Then look at what is the purpose of this term within the organization, and then look at the characteristics, and then look at how is that term calculated, how is it derived, and then who and why, and we can make use of those 5, those 6 friends of the 5 W's of 1 H, and this is what we're talking about here. And then what's important is publishing those certified definitions into search. And being able to search for things. And this is something that John Borman spends a lot of time working on in the search and the classification layers. Okay, so it's upstream. It's upstream of, I think it's upstream of a lot of our data that we start modeling. It's upstream of doing the BI. It's upstream of defining KPIs. It's upstream of a lot of things, and we just don't get this side, don't get it right. Now, I know Paul Bolton's on the line, and he's had some really interesting challenges with working and building an enterprise data model, looking at data and not knowing what the hell that data is all about and the challenges that it has. Mr. Bolton, any comments from you?
No, I'm sitting here smiling, and I've got a cross-check on the other screen of exactly that. I'm looking at data. I was looking at data before the webinar started and trying to make sense of it. So the question here is, would this live upstream? I would also, in my experience so far, just concur and say, wow, I wouldn't start again if I didn't start here.
Well, now Shane brings out an important point. Is he refers to as the BI semantic layer, and that was the first time I experienced it in the early 2000s and the late 1990s. We had a BI semantic layer, and I believe Cognos was the first tool to bring that in. we would throw all sorts of stuff into a cube or into a database, and people couldn't understand what those columns were. So we built a semantic layer on top of that. It had some of the calculations on how to derive things, and then we would get the business people to work through that BI semantic layer. Shane, is that the one that you are referring to when you use the term BI semantic layer?
Yeah, so as data people, we love to reuse terms, right? So the market's reusing the term semantic layer to mean the BI semantic layer of old. They're using it as a metrics layer. They're using it as a caching layer, and now they're trying to use it as a context layer to drive AI decisions. And so for me, when somebody says semantic layer, I just want to know, are they talking about a BI semantic layer? Right. So something that sits in our architecture on the right between the data and the last mile tool, or are they talking about some other definition for it?
Right. And certainly the one that I'm talking about in this situation is really just the business language that we use and the business meaning. And so it's getting that understanding before we go to modeling a customer or a policy or an event or things like that. So that's the area that I'm speaking about. And Vivo, I'm not sure. I think you were waiting for this. Any comments from your side?
Yeah, I was. I think this being specific about the layer, I think does help. So if you're talking about the BI semantic layer, for example, right, it sort of helps where that sits in, which means that you could have different semantic layers at various levels of your data stack. Right. But you tend to have people just referring to semantic layers at different levels, but it's not clear what they mean. So I think this does provide some clarity when I think about this going forward. So thanks.
Great, and then there's also I certainly like the work that John O'Gorman's done. He's got that framework of the classification on the Q16 where you can understand what these different terms relate to in terms of classifying a term and then making that available and understandable to the business. So here's just some semantic links. Remember, we're talking subject, predicate, object. The customer submits a claim. A claim relates to a policy. The risk event triggers an assessment. Now, I'm hoping you can see that when you spend time defining these characteristics of a customer, so what does a customer do? Well, in insurance, it could also be a policyholder. They submit claims. That's a characteristic of a customer. And so we go on. And I'm sure you can see that when you do this and you write the words down and you then confirm that understanding with the business, then there should almost be a librarian per domain within your data that manages these definitions and that people agree on to say, this is the definition, this is what we agree a customer to be. And you can have multiple options. You typically start off with option 1, option 2, option 3. And just the other day, I was doing some definitions for the DMBOK 3, and I'm sure you all know on the context diagram, you have something called technology, and everyone's arguing about, well, what is a technology? And then I did some research and I found 3 options. Some people refer to it as a capability for automation. Some people refer to it as a system, and we have these different definitions. But I think it starts off with the language that you're using and then agreeing on that language. And of course, they can be different. So a different company can have a different meaning for it, but we need to go somewhere to understand what the context is that the people are using. Okay. So the top enabler for AI, we talk about a semantic layer. This is some of the feedback, the trusted data, the automated metadata lineage, and an understanding of the data, and data that's being certified. So that's one of the top layers that we get. And now if we jump to the Excel, you can see we've got questions on information architecture. published architecture with a concept model with stewardship. So do we have owners? We have owner people that own that terminology, and if you don't agree with them, well, you can go and have a discussion with that person. So treat the domain as a product with a clear owner. It's got documented purpose, quality, service level objectives. Okay. Not so much service level agreements, but service level objectives, meaning where do we want to be, the lineage, and then having the idea to be able to control that tomorrow. Oh, shucks, I jumped too quickly. Sorry. I was actually on information architecture. And treat each domain as a product, and then we have the same thing. Okay. Now, so if you look at data architecture is responsible for structures, it's responsible for flows, it's responsible for defining the product and the contracts that we build. So typically the model progression is conceptual data model to a logical data model to a physical data model. And a lot of times the data architect does not deal with the physical model. They may be involved in building it and then re-engineering the logical and the conceptual to get that right, and it's very aligned with domain. And then have complete lifecycle management of the data, the published data products. It was a nice introduction on data products from Pune on Monday, and then also the data contracts. I don't know how many of you spend time reading up on that little standard, and that standard has a whole lot of things like the fundamentals of a data product, the schema, the data quality rules, the SLAs, the SLOs, and so what is nice, and Shane was sharing that as well, is the case of, so now what we've got is we've got the data and the metadata wrapped together in a data product. Okay, what is the benefit of that? Well, we could be evaluating the data quality expectations before we use the data product, and it can be checked on a regular basis. One of the things that I'm a little bit concerned about of having quality statements in a data product is that tends to be defined by the person creating the data product and not the person consuming the data product. And I have this understanding of data quality is about fit for purpose. So if I consume data quality, then I need data quality according to me, what I need, not according to the person who builds the data product. So I'm not sure exactly how that works, but I can tell you that I'm working with Dan Myers, who's the Conform Dimension, and he's doing some training. He's about to release a book. He's doing some training, and in there he talks about data products, data contracts, and appropriate data quality definition. But of course, he says we've got to go further than that. We've got to also go to governance policies and the use of those data. So it's not just about the data product and the metadata, it's also about the policies that control the use of that. Okay, when we go into the technology side, and this is something that I've been looking at quite extensively in terms of policy as code. I've just spent the last 2 months writing policies, every day in and day out, writing policies, and then also hoping that this policy is going to mean something after it's been reviewed, and is going to bring some change within the organization. I don't know how many of you have written policies, but I always find you write them and then nobody uses them. Then they go to procedures. And so, Shane, it's nice to see your policy in that data architecture platform. But I'd love to have maybe a quick response from you in terms of saying, when you talk about those data policies, are there policies that are involved in the execution on the platform? Or is it still a manual control that before a data product or something goes, or an ETL pipeline goes into the data architecture, it needs to be validated? Shane, on yours specifically, your review gates and review content.
Yeah, so mine are more definitions of intent than policies
Okay.
that are enforced. I haven't got to that stage. I mean, ideally, we should be able to take that intent and then find some way to codify it and then
Yes.
actually identify when the policies have been breached.
Right.
But I'm nowhere near that part of the process yet. That's always been a goal, but been a few decades and I've never got there. So I'm always intrigued if anybody else actually has.
So it was interesting because I took my 9 policies that I'd written, one on data quality, data classification, data catalog and metadata, data privacy and data governance, and I said to them, please, how much of this can be used as policy as code in an observability platform, a technical platform to be able to automate? And it was stunning to see the things, we could check that this contract has a completeness, it has this dimension, it has that. And it has privacy, so does it have, is this data shareable or things like that? So it was amazing how much it could interpret from those policies to be able to say, well, that's the appropriate setting within the contract. Yes, Shane.
Yeah, we're going through SOC 2 at the moment, and what's interesting is using some of the SOC 2 platform that hooks into our Google Cloud infrastructure and our product, and then actually validates the policies for us.
Yes.
And so I look at that and I go, that's actually saved us time and effort.
Yeah.
Why is that not available on data platforms?
Right.
That's intriguing.
Yeah. Great. Okay. So what we are trying to do is to, again, not waste our time like writing business glossary terminology and then using it, writing policies and then can't enforce it. So how do we bring this platform together to support analytics, not just LLMs and AI, but also the BI, the data lake, warehouse, streaming, APIs, ML ops, vector databases, knowledge graphs? How do we bring a platform like this together to enable it? Both in trust. So are we sure that if an LLM goes to this data set to find information, that it has the appropriate access, we've got the appropriate controls, and we've got the right observability. So policy as code is also auto-tagging sensitive data, enforcing access, and then validating data quality thresholds. Mr. Kovler, any comments from you in this area? You're on mute, so I'm not sure if you're talking.
I was talking. And I wanted to say, when it comes to this sort of thing, then Mr. Paul Bolton is in front of me. But I actually haven't myself been involved in a lot of this sort of thing.
Okay.
The part of the project, I tend to, perhaps on purpose, sidestep it, or it's already been done, or it's been done by a separate stream or something like that. So I just note with interest.
Okay, great. So I think what is important here is to recognize that basically when we put these LLMs into our environment and the agents and stuff like that, they need access to the data. And we're not always going to expose those areas to our applications like SAP and ERP or things like that. I think it will take a bit too much to be able to get access to that. There was a really nice presentation that Invivo gave about using agents to be able to build SQL queries to be able to query the database. Now, I think it's going to be hard enough on our enterprise data warehouses and our data marts to get that right and not have to go back into SQL and try to, and especially a SAP database, and try to make sense out of where to get the data from and how this data relates to the other areas. So how do we bring it into this big data architecture with the little data and how do we make sure that we are providing a comprehensive view. And I've seen lots of people suggesting that using graph databases and knowledge graph databases that bring some of that context in is a lot more reliable, a lot more worthwhile. But I haven't seen many people being able to convert their entire data warehouse and data marts into a knowledge graph. I'm just wondering if anyone else is working on that, or has any comments on being able to expose all of that through a knowledge graph. Because they said, I mean, the benefit of knowledge graph is that these agents and the LLMs can use inference on graph databases, and that's what they're designed for. So it makes sense that it's in a better platform, but I haven't seen anybody using this in anger. I think John may have. I know John puts some of those knowledge graphs to me. All right, moving on.
Howard?
Yes, Mr. Bolton.
Okay, I'm just thinking of the policy as coded, the how. Are you talking about, say, I'm working in a language model and I, for whatever, a stupid example maybe, but I give it my password. Is that what you're saying? It automatically detects the word password is and then tags it as.
Yes. So I think let me try to make it a little bit more meaningful. So, for example, if we have a policy on what an organization, an insurance company deems to be a high-risk claim, those things can change, Paul, and you'd want, and that policy can be used for people and it can be used for machines, right? So they would suggest that if a claim has this, and this, or this feature, and that feature, or this outlier, or this deviation, then we deem it to be high risk. And so you can put that in a policy statement that the business people would write, and then you can make use of that. Does that help with it?
Okay.
But of course, you need to have your privacy policy, and it's going to suggest what fields are sensitive with the classification. And then an LLM has to be very careful about, when you're saying, oh, here's my password, it should be saying, no, you shouldn't be giving me your password, or I don't want your password, or whatever it is. They should adhere. Or it's a case of saying, well, I cannot talk about any individual from an ethical point of view. So if you ask an LLM, well, what do you think of Howard Diesel? And I'm seeing some of the, like Llama, that they say, well, you can't answer that question. So that's a better thing than just saying you can't answer it because you're talking about sensitive data. Good.
Cool, thanks.
Great. So then we talk about this unified governance, or if we talk about the super axle, and this for me is very important. Is I no longer think that we can operate in these governance silos. We can't operate corporate governance dealing with this risk and these business challenges or business regulation, and then data governance dealing with their set of regulations, and AI governance dealing with the EU AI Act, and records management dealing with RIMPA and things like that. When we come to, we have to bring everyone together and work together with an initiative. Any initiative, business initiative, and we start with, and then each party need to bring their governance to play into one cohesive system, because we've now got agents, we've got LLMs that are creating vital records. So when a chatbot is having a conversation with you, that conversation is a vital record. Okay, so we need to have the records people understanding, well, how vital is that record? What's the retention cycle? Can we get back to it? And how do we store the content of the extract of that conversation with a level of quality? So when we ask the LLM for a record to create a vital record at the end of the same conversation, has someone vetted it? And have we agreed that that's exactly what the conversation was all about? So we need to bring all of this governance together. And then making sure that the governance is continued from the design, privacy impact assessments, ethical impact assessments, purposeful design, to the building, looking at how it's getting built, what techniques are being deployed and made use of. The deployment, has it reached its right level of quality before it gets deployed? How do we monitor it on an ongoing basis? How do we pull it out? If something's wrong, how do we pull that model out of production and then bring the previous one in? And then how do we look at the improvements? So all of this needs to be controlled, and we need all of the different parties controlling it. And we can't do this on our own. Okay. No model goes live or no model stays live unless data quality, privacy, and more risks check. So it's not just a upfront thing, it's ongoing. So basically, in summary, your AI power, when we get the power out of AI, when all of these axes and architecture and governance are strong and coordinated, we need to look at a holistic design. We can't just have the AI decision scientist or whatever is running away and building something on their own. We need to come to the party. We need to help them. And it's not about trying to control them and saying, oh, well, you can't do that and you can't do that. It's about being part of it and contributing to all of these areas so that we make it safe and we make it effective. It achieves what the goals of the business goals are. Total quality, we've spoken a lot about. And please remember, I liked some of the work that the University of Little Rock is doing in terms of defining quality and going back to some of the total quality, the TQM. And we need to look at how well do you make business decisions. What's the business decision model? It's not just the data quality, it's the records quality, it's the knowledge quality, and it's the business decision quality. And we need to pay attention to all of these things. So I'm starting to get to this point where I stop using the term data quality and talk to business about total quality. And we will hive off in terms of at a data product level, we talk about data quality. But then, how the sort of business decisions are going to be made on this. And that could be coming into the model, in the person, in the human, whatever that may be. But the metadata or the context is this connected fabric, linking the meaning, the lineage, the sensitivity across all of these different areas. And we need that metadata. Corporate memory, running out of a bit of time here. Treating the knowledge as an asset, right? So what those people, if we are now starting to automate the way in which people approve a claim, one of the first things we need to do is get that tacit knowledge out, and we can't get it out directly. And I keep on saying that wrong. We can't just go from tacit to explicit. There's a level in between that we need to go from. Sorry, Paul, you asked the question, and this you're not talking about data quality, you're talking about total quality.
Just total quality, okay.
Total quality. Now, that was what Short and Deming worked on, right? They didn't work on data quality. They worked on the quality at the business level and all of the aspects that went into that thing. We then applied it to data. Does that make sense?
Yes, it's quite wide to talk about that. So that interests me. It just reminds me also that we said about this earlier. Just decision quality.
Yes,
that's also a nice way to directly link things around data quality. Has a direct impact on decision quality, and that in turn has an impact on business running.
Right.
Running the business and so on.
But
yes.
Sorry, sometimes we think that just the data quality is going to help the decision quality, but we don't always understand the group of people that need to be consulted to make that decision. And there's a gap between what the data is presenting and then how the decision is made. We don't just make it purely based on that situation. Does that also help, Paul? So don't just think it's data quality then drives the decision quality. It's the technique they use to make a decision, the risk, the people, the team, the knowledge that they have, that's brought in to make a good business decision. we only one small part of that total quality. So I think Shane is his hand up. Shane and John, both of them. I'm sure they want something. They have something to say.
Yeah, actually, I've got a question. So there's a whole lot of stuff on the interweb right now about decision traces, and so doing some research, the way I articulate it, my understanding, but it could be wrong, but the way I think of it at the moment is, let's say we had an organization that sold enterprise software, and they had a policy in place that maximum discount for any customer is 20%. But everybody in the organization knows that at the end of Q4, you can go to the sales manager and get an extra 5% for $1 million deal that will close on the last day. So that's a policy that's in effect, but not documented. Now, if we upload our policy documents, from a wiki or a document management store with all the approved policies for the organization to the context plane, and the LLMs or agents use that, they're going to enforce a 20% maximum discount level.
Right.
The idea of decision traces is we actually see the decisions being made, and we actually use the LLM to document the true policies being applied.
Right.
And then one of the questions comes, well, where are those discussions? Are they in Slack? Are they on the phone? Like, where actually is the data or information that can infer that a decision outside the documented policy was? So that's really intriguing for me, right? I can see massive value in the idea of inferring the policies that are applied. I can see massive implementation problems of where the hell do we actually find out that shadow policy data. But is anybody else working in that space at the moment?
Yeah, so this is part of why I use the term knowledge management. And Shane, so part of this thing is, yes, there's a policy, but then there's also the way people apply that policy that is sitting in people's heads. And so we need to be able to also make use of their knowledge and their understandings to provide those things like guidelines and further decision making, and then being able to say, okay, yes, that's what the policy said, but in these cases, in these situations, it could be changed and we could make deviations on that, and that's an acceptable approach. So knowledge management is where the knowledge managers, and there's an ISO standard there that are trying to capture all of those actions and observations and actions that people are taking, to be able to explain how the LLM should work. But you're 100% correct. There's decision traces. There's also something called execution traces. And what the observability platform is doing as well is that it's actually every single engagement, it's bringing that execution trace into play, analyzing it, and if it finds a certain amount of deviation, it will escalate that to a SME to be able to say, how has this been applied and what is the correctness of the decision that came about? Or should it be a situation of, well, I don't really understand it, but let me allocate this to a human and go human in the loop to complete that gap that hasn't been thought of. Okay. Yes, John.
Yeah, so I just wanted to go back to the total quality thing for a second, and to your previous slides, Howard. For me, total quality is kind of like starts at the supply chain, which is, as you mentioned before, about the glossary level.
Right.
So when you get the glossary level right, you get the classifications and definitions, and there's even more something more important. It's like, what are we actually talking about in terms of structural stuff?
Right.
So when you get all of that correct upstream, total quality kind of flows out of that. I think you mentioned that in one of your previous slides. So I just wanted to make that point.
And I like that. And it's, when we look at the knowledge side, which is where that one semantic is in terms of the glossaries, the ontologies. So what is the correctness of that knowledge? And what is the relevance and the traceability of that knowledge? And so when we bring this knowledge as an asset, there's a whole lot of validations around the knowledge as well that needs to be done. And I'm sure, John, you must be doing a lot of that when you build these classification systems using your Q16.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And to your question about are we building data warehouses, part of the upstream stuff is adding those mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive categories,
Right.
which are coincidentally the same dimensions that data warehouses use. So we're doing some work on that now too. So
Okay.
it's proving a very useful model. I
Nice.
like this up in the upper right-hand corner, conflicting definitions are systemic.
Yeah.
But the other thing that's interesting about that is the conflicting definitions are systemic, but the metrics that are attached to those things like customers are also problematic because
Yes.
people describe customers in different ways in databases, and
Right.
they also define the word customer in different ways. So there's this double whammy that you get. So
Correct.
yeah,
And
so thanks for mentioning that, Howard. I always appreciate your tout.
thank you. And that's where we get clever sometimes in making use of abstraction. So we start defining a party, and then we
Yeah,
yeah
right.
we use it incorrectly, and we get into trouble. So
Yeah,
um,
exactly. And making it
what's
visible. I mean, that's the whole part of the
yes,
glossary journey is to say, oh, we don't define customer that way, or we
right,
don't describe customer. We don't attach that kind of behavior to we call them a policy holder, not a customer. So exposing that amongst cross disciplines is really, really critical to
yeah,
the whole
and
supply chain.
I love the work done by, or the stories that Mark Atkins and Terry Smith have in terms of
Right.
the
Yeah.
arguments they have about getting an agreed version of the term and the way things go, and the and then establishing those communities of people who own those definitions, and applying that librarian approach to it. So I
Yeah, and you
think we
also
miss a
touched
lot
on
of that.
something. Yeah, I agreed. And you also touched on something else too, Howard, is and those of us of a certain vintage have been in these bun fights about definitions. And it's sometimes easier to say, okay, yes, we know we have multiple definitions, but if you're going to use one, you have to say what scope.
Right,
So
right.
marketing customer, accounting customer,
What
preferred,
yeah,
all
what
those
scope,
types of,
what context, yeah,
yeah, because it's
yeah,
really, really difficult sometimes to get to a consensus on
right.
definitions. So you have to have a mechanism for managing those.
Fantastic.
Anyways, another great session, Howard. I have to drop off. Thanks so
Thank you
much for
very
this.
much.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so the other thing that I've been talking about is that was Nisha about the idea of automated controls governed by wire, and how can we bring this in, because we as manual people can't keep up with the way things are moving, and so we have to find ways of making use of AI to help us achieve what we need to do. Continuous monitoring all the time, real time, model drift, data drift. Is our data profile changed, and we need to bring all that together. So we need to go on a journey. It is about starting off with being reactive and then starting to informative, predictive, and transformative. We need to move along this journey. And here are my questions that I shared within that Excel spreadsheet that talks about all of the different questions that you should ask yourself, and where would you like to be? Okay. So you'll see this Excel spreadsheet has got a whole lot of hidden areas. And then what I put in here is something called expected. And I like this column to be able to say, what do I think my executives expect of my data? What's their current expectation? And if that expectation is too high, I've got big risks on my expected risk. So can you see here, when we talk about knowledge management, the organization thinks we over there on managing our knowledge, but we actually over here. So the distance that we go is really high. So please do this thing. Anyone wants it, I'll share it with you. But go through that and actually ask yourself, well, what do we think the executives believe the state of our data is? And I get the feeling that they believe our data is much better than we believe our data is. I don't know. And I'd like to end there. That's basically, these are the questions that you should be asking yourself. And then look at the quick wins, like a glossary or a concept model, and then trying to look at data products with contracts or policy as code pilots for total quality, and then start to make people aware of the challenges that we are facing on introducing or getting our data and our records and our knowledge to a level that can be used by GenAI. I think it's a big road that we have ahead of us. So, any comments? I'd like to stop there. I think I've gone way too far, way too long. But any observations or comments? If you would like the spreadsheet and the PDF, what I can show you is maybe just to help your business people. I've also built a set of slides here in terms of what are the barriers. How does this wheel and AI work? What is the approach to develop? What's AI looking like? Information architecture. Yes, Shane.
So question for you, because last year I was doing some work, just some experimentation and research around this idea of what type of context do we need to hold to help the LLMs give us better responses. And I kind of categorized it as 4 types. So I categorized the idea of business context. So that's our definitions, our glossaries, our taxonomies, our ontologies, our concept models, our documentation, our policies, all that broader business context that explains how an organization works. I thought about structural context. So that's what we would typically have called technical metadata. So, tables, columns, document structures, those kind of things. I had an idea of operational context, which was the 3rd one. So that's usage logs,
lineage, some of that,
lineage,
the movement of the data,
trust scores, scores, all that kind of more data. It's not metadata, it's data, but we know that if we make that available to the LLMs, they give us a better response sometimes. And then the 4th one was agent context, this idea of our prompts is valuable context that actually we need to manage and surface in different ways. And so I came up with those 4 buckets, and I've just been playing with, okay, I've got this thing over here, this thing I know, like a data quality rule for me would go into probably the business context or the structural context, but the data quality score would go into the operational context.
Yes.
So how would those 4 things kind of map with the way you think about it, right? With the spreadsheet you've got?
What you've listed is typically the different types of metadata in the DMBOK, but some of the areas that you're missing are the unstructured metadata as well, that around records. So there's a whole lot there, and then again on knowledge as well, that correctness, and so there's quite a lot of metadata on the different types of data that you have. And then as well, it's actually on the metadata itself, where I think you may know that the definition of whether it's data or metadata is dependent on the person using that data. So I may be using your metadata as data, and so you get into these circular things. But you're on the right track in terms of DMBOK used an older version, but the DMBOK 2 uses business, technical, operational. But the one thing that I do find with it that's missing there is the administrative and the unstructured metadata that you need to have in terms of describing a policy or describing a document or a vital record. There's stuff there that doesn't fit into that either.
Yeah, I suppose I struggle with the term metadata as the overarching definition for these things now, because I always go back to technical metadata is where I saw it. And so if I say the context of who used what set of data over the last 12 months is valuable, I don't see that as metadata, right? And so because it's a record. It's considered to be operational metadata. So usage, access. So, but again, we come back to this definition. It's what is the data that we're talking about, and then what is the metadata? So if I look at data in a database,
That's the data. Now, what is all the sorts of metadata that come on top of that? And access is a big one. PCI, not just about any failed access, about what time did you use this data and why are you looking at it 2 o'clock in the morning? So that's, again, it's metadata to be doing auditing and control of the environment and the use of the data. So anything that's going to help me understand how the data is being used and the meaning of the data becomes metadata.
Yeah, and so again, I still struggle with the idea that a set of log files with data in it that people access the data at 2 a.m., which is outside the policy, can be seen as metadata. And that's with me, right? That's my problem is I can see a row and I go, that's data, and there's lots of rows, that's that's data. I don't treat it as metadata. So again, it's my problem with the definition of metadata.
But you're tripping over the thing of, if I see a log file, because you use it as someone that's going to extract information out of it, you can see it as data. But other people see it, especially the database, sees it as writing data about the context of what actually happened in that scenario. So it's your mindset, it's your perspective as to whether you call it data or metadata. That's the first thing you got to get right.
Yeah, and that's hard when you're kind of used to using it in one way and not the other. So it makes sense to me. Yeah, thank you.
Like your execution trace on your LLM as the way it conducted the interview, what was said, what happened, how long did it take to answer. That execution trace becomes an eval, and then it turns into quality and things like that. So a whole lot of things that.
Yeah, and that's been one of the richest areas that we get value out of. So, again, reinforce that for anybody who's doing it, especially when you're using and I'll use quotes here, reasoning models, forcing the LLM to output the path it took before it gave a response, and then using that as part of what you do is really, really valuable. If you lose that context of that path, it's much harder to figure out what you need to change or add to get a better response. So Shane,
I don't know if you've seen that eval-driven development approach. That's working off the evals, and the evals are based on evaluations of the execution trace, and that's giving you feedback as to what you should be coding, what you should be enhancing within the model. So that stuff's getting tightly linked.
Yeah.
Guys, I need to drop off. Any other comments? Anything else?
Thanks, Howard.
Thank you very much.
Lots to digest here.
Yeah. Are you ready, Paul? Is your data ready?
Yeah.